Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. I'm your guest host, Jeff Kritzberg with Innovative Financial Solutions and Insurance. Today, my guest speaker is Kurt Haas, Advanced Planning Advisor with Mount Sinai Memorial Parks and Mortuaries. Thank you so much for joining us. Our podcast gives us the opportunity not only to get to know different professionals in their fields and what they do, but get to know more about them personally and find out, why they do what they do. The subject of advanced planning is near and dear to my heart because my parents didn't plan ahead, which left me only to deal with their passing, but planning their funerals as well. So we'll start with Kurt. Welcome. Tell me a little bit more about yourself and how you got into this field.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate you having me on. This is going to be fun because we're friends. I hope it's cool to disclose that. We hang out, we play on a softball team together. So I moved to LA like 25 years ago and went to the American Film Institute to study film directing. And I make a joke often with people whenever it comes up and they ask me, like, where are you from? Where did you go to school? And I say, well, I went to film school. I got a master's in film directing, and now I work at Mount Sinai. And, I've noticed it doesn't always hit. Like, people don't know it's a joke. It's just a joke. I love my job. I feel like the journey of my life that led me here began in film and TV in Los Angeles, but I feel strongly that I'm doing exactly what I need to be doing, and I take with me all my experiences. But I did spend like a decade in television, and though it was great and it was rewarding, and sometimes, it's a crazy business, but I had a good time. I didn't have the best work-life balance, with a lot of people in the industry complain about. So around COVID, when things shook up a lot, I decided to try getting my real estate license. I kept working in TV, but I tried that on kind of on the side, and gradually, when things kind of picked up, I thought it'd be fun to dive into real estate, which also, like telling stories. Doing real estate prepared me in a lot of ways for Mount Sinai because it's customer service, dedication to clients, you're a fiduciary. And I did that for a good period of time. And a couple of things happened, personal things really, that kind of put me in this very specific place where I work with, people planning for their own end of life cycle or taking care of loved ones who have passed. I think October 7th actually had a lot to do with it because when October 7th happened, I became very dedicated to wanting to work in the Jewish community. I studied the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for honestly like a couple of decades, from my first trip to Israel and the surrounding area really when I was 20. And I have family there. My wife has family out there. So that was a real personal time for us. And I began to kind of look around. Something else happened. I had a kind of a health crisis, I guess you could say, without getting too deeply into it. I have this thing called desmoid fibromatosis, which is a really rare type of a tumor that you can't just remove from your body. And thankfully, unlike cancer, which spreads throughout your body, it stays local and, attacks just sort of one area. In my case, it attacked my ureter. So I had some serious complications and had a nephrostomy tube coming out of my body for several months. I was hospitalized a few times, and it was really kind of like a brush with death for me, in a way like a lot of people experience. If you've ever gotten a CT scan back and there was an unexpected mass, and God willing, most often it's a scare. And in my case, it was something in between. There were several days we thought I had probably one of two bad types of malignant cancer. And it turned out to be something really rare that a lot of people didn't know about. But thank God, after like 2 weeks of my wife and I really thinking this could be a life changer, we found out what it was and we moved into taking care of it. But that got me into the realm of really wanting to do service, wanting to be in touch with helping people and being part of something very real, making a difference. And just to circle back, I feel like I've gone on a little bit too long on this background because I want to get into what I do and what you do. But I do think that as a storyteller, I was always drawn to telling real stories and dealing with real questions of life and death and love and loss. And, yeah, so I feel real good about what I'm doing. I think actually one more little nugget, because Rabbi Aronson is somebody we both know who had a little bit that really resonated with me. He had once said in one of his videos he sends out that sometimes the thing you want to do in life, even if you're like very talented at it and you've dedicated your life to it, I think in his case he wanted to be a professional guitar player. Sometimes that thing you want and you dream of isn't in line with what the world needs you to do. And I'm not trying to like, be over the top with like the world needs me to be at Mount Sinai, but it was just nice to find that it wasn't really what I thought it was that I was supposed to be doing, but I found something that, the community needed. And I have, 15 incredible colleagues and I work for a terrific organization. So it's not just that they need me, but they need people doing this kind of work and the various facets of it.
Well, to that point, very few people do, their job is their dream job, and that's what
Mm.
they always want it to be. And it doesn't feel like a job to them, and they wake up every day with a smile on their face and love doing what they do. Those people are definitely blessed. But a lot of people, like both of us, circumstances bring us to, what we need to do. And sometimes it's in both of our professions, we get clients because they've experienced something in their life and they want to do something about it. So, like with you, I think obviously if they've had to go through the experience with other family members of having to deal with funerals and stuff, and maybe they want to get ahead of the game, that's why they come see you ahead of time, and we'll get more into that. In my case, when I deal with life insurance or like long-term care or something like that, if the clients who've had to experience not having that kind of coverage and dealing with caring for loved ones, or maybe they had that kind of coverage and they had a really good experience of making their lives easier, obviously missing their loved ones or dealing with a health problem, but having the kind of coverage to make their lives easier helps them do something that they didn't plan on doing, or it brings them to us for us to help
Mm.
them.
Definitely. People who have that experience and kind of know this is a good way to go, whether they're recommending it to others or they're, trying to implement it in their own life. We see that a lot. Oh yeah.
So let's get into what you do.
Yeah.
So advanced planning. Tell me what advanced planning means.
Yeah. So advanced planning, it can mean so many things, but as I've learned working here, it has to do with end of life cycle. It's done in two parts. So people, sometimes when you've lost, like exactly what you're talking about, maybe you've lost a loved one and you've come into contact with a mortuary in the cemetery, you've had a funeral service, and you begin to think, what's going to happen to me? What are my plans? I think a huge part of advanced planning is just figuring out what you want and communicating that to your loved ones, wherever you do it, Mount Sinai, Forest Lawn, anywhere, either it's something that doesn't even involve a cemetery. It's just taking that time to think that through. And I'm an advisor. So mainly people come to me because they want to purchase cemetery property at Mount Sinai. And like I said, it's done in two parts. That property is the first part. That's the term that we use to describe anywhere where an interment will take place. So we all know about being buried in the ground. So we have ground space, beautiful ground space. We have two parks. We have one in Simi Valley. We have one in the Hollywood Hills. You could choose to be in a single ground space. There are family gardens, beautiful gardens where they're kind of enclosed and it's private. They have landscaping. People do this for generations of family. But in most cases, people are buying a space for themselves, maybe also their spouse often. And I work with them in advance, which has two different or maybe several different advantages, but the main parts are emotional advantage of not having their children have to figure this out. What would mom or dad want? How are we going to pay for this? And, when you buy in advance, you have the ability to pay over time without any interest. You can put a down payment down and do that so it becomes more economically feasible for a lot of people. And the second part are the arrangements. It's everything but the place where you're going to be interred. So it's everything from transportation. I mean, who thinks about this stuff? I mean, thankfully, I haven't had, may your parents' memory be a blessing. I haven't had that. My parents are alive. I've had grandparents who passed, but for me, there was a lot of learning. But somebody needs to bring the deceased into our care at Mount Sinai, and that's part of what we arrange for people. That's like the first step of arrangements, and then it's how are we going to prepare them in our mortuary. Are there certain rituals, religious rituals and traditions like we have in Judaism, like tahara, which is a type of purification of the deceased that's done by a special group called the Chevra Kadima, or, we have other really wonderful, and there'd be like a whole nother podcast episode on these traditions, like a shomer, which means guardian, somebody who comes and recites psalms and is there just to guard the deceased. It's an old tradition that goes back, thousands of years. Or, most people are a little bit more in the classic realm and they just want to do the standard preparation and they want to pick out a casket, which some people have a hard time with, some people have a lot of fun with. And, they'll pay for things like death certificates. They'll pay for their funeral service. Do they want to be in the chapel and then graveside or one or the other? We'll put a whole package together of all of these arrangements and they can be adjusted. But most people, it's interesting, Jeff, you have part of this program is you have the opportunity to say, can somebody change my arrangements? And if so, who and what? And more often than not, people say no. And the reason they say no is they don't want their family, their children to have to think about, to worry about it. When they pass, they just want them to be mourning. And that's how it works. When you do your advanced planning in full, there's just one phone number that your loved ones call to Mount Sinai. We bring the deceased in our care. We know exactly how to take care of them, what to do, and all family needs to do at that point, generally speaking, is, we can get into the nuances of that and how it's financed, but generally speaking, they just need to schedule the funeral after they've spoken to family. So it's emotional and financial, and it's huge. I think I've seen a lot of families who are dealing with this kind of like you had to, without any planning in place. And it's sad because, whether there's just not a lot of time to consider because they need to have a service, maybe in a couple of days or a few days, or they just need to figure out how to come up with the money because, it's expensive, unfortunately. I mean, it just is.
Again, speaking from experience, the opposite of advanced planning is at the moment planning, whatever words you want to use for it. And,
Yeah.
what you're dealing with at that moment is, a parent or a loved one has passed and you're dealing with the grief and
Mhm.
you start the whole process of contacting family and are you going to have people back at the house and dealing with family, where are you going to put them to stay?
Mm.
That's stress enough. But to have, if nothing is arranged at that point, you have to meet with the mortuary. You got to, again, deal with the transportation, which depending on where they are, if they're local, you're lucky. I mean, I've had clients, that they're buried in another state or they're coming from another state and there's
Right.
time and a lot of arrangements that has to be taking place. And just simple things, the casket, what you may want to dress them in, clothes,
Mhm. Mhm.
what all these little details that now you have to question yourself, what would that person like? Am I doing the right thing? And
Yeah.
it's just a bunch of stress
So
that
much.
adds to your grief at that time, which is really why I really appreciate having you on this podcast so we can kind of get people thinking. And people
Mhm.
think about it when every time I go to a funeral, I sit there and I think of two things, like what would I want and what would people say about me when they get up to talk. And I think that's natural. Like everybody at the funeral is like, wow,
Sure.
there's some people who give some great speeches. You're like, wow, what would people say about me? But from a loved one's perspective, having to do all that, within a day or two in being rushed through it and having to make those decisions just adds to the stress and grief that as the parent or as if you do this in advance, you're taking so much off the plate of the loved ones who remain, and you really give them, I think, the opportunity to celebrate your life and honor you that in the way that they can deal with without having the stress of all this other stuff. So I really
For
see the
sure.
value in advanced planning.
It,
And it's not one of the subjects that everybody loves to talk about. Um,
it's hard for a
and
lot of people. It takes
yeah,
it takes a lot of courage.
brings me
Yeah.
back to you is not everybody could do what you do. So,
Hmm.
in my opinion, I think it's a takes a special kind of person to have the conversation with people and talk about this subject. What of your personal traits or qualities do you think gives you success in in that ability?
Mm. I mean, I believe in every field I've worked in, I think people would say I'm empathetic. I have a lot of empathy. I can be present. I think it takes that. I think people, I hear a lot from my boss actually that if you don't care, you can't work at Mount Sinai. Like you
Sure.
have to actually care. You need to care. You need to see these people, as individuals. You need to be tapped into what they're experiencing because it can be really emotional, obviously. But then at the same time, you need, like, I have a love for learning. So there was a nice big learning curve, and I enjoyed learning about this industry and learning about all the things we offer. And because ultimately my job is not, I'm not a counselor. I'm there to feel with them, to be with them, to understand how to speak with them, but at the same time my focus is to guide them, to advise them, and that's what they want from me in those moments, especially at need. I do work with families at need to buy cemetery property, and that's tough. Somebody just died and they need to find the place for them. But even in advance, people want different things from you. Some people like really want you to have a good joke, or like, let's keep this light. And I think some people want you to kind of understand that like this might just be, it's never just a transaction for me, but like this might be my job I go to every day. But like it took them a lot to come in and do this. I think it's like any kind of financial housekeeping, and but there's this sort of aspect of it which you mentioned, like nobody wants to have to contemplate. Some people, yeah, it's tough, but I know that when people do this, they walk away with a lot of relief. I think
Yeah, it's a big weight off
particularly,
the
yeah,
shoulder.
yeah, exactly.
Saying I have it, it's done. We don't have to worry
Mm,
about it anymore. When the time comes, hopefully it's way into the future. It's
yeah.
all done, and my family won't have to worry about it. It has to be a great feeling. It's the same thing, if you got your will and your trust done, or
Mhm,
you have life insurance, and if
mm,
something happens to be my spouse or my family is going to be taken care of. These are
yeah.
all things that are planning, either for the expected or unexpected, and knowing that you have it as a person taken care of is
Hmm.
definitely peace of mind, and lets you enjoy other things, I would think.
Definitely. I tell people like, let's do this and then go back to living your life. Like forget
Mhm.
about it. It's done. And I think it's important to say too that it's expensive, but like I said, when you can put money down, pay it over time, it makes it more manageable. But there are also like, ways to do it that aren't as expensive as other ways.
Well, when you're saying expensive, again, coming from experience, my dad passed away 21 years ago, and my mom passed away 7 years ago. And I can tell you the difference in costs from 21 years ago and 7 years ago is quite dramatic. I mean, it goes
Mm-hmm.
with everything that, if we look at
For
prices,
sure.
from 2004 versus 2019, everything is different. And what 2019 and today look like, I'm going to assume is different. We don't need to go into the exact details because everything is different. Um,
Sure.
but when you do it in advance, just like anything else, you're getting ahead of the game. So you're paying what you're paying today versus if you wait to the end, you're going to pay whatever price is at that time. And if it's another 10, 20 years from now, it's going to just be that much more then. It's not going to go down in price.
Definitely. There's no question. There's no
Well,
question.
it, can you tell me about Mount Sinai? So I know that
Mm.
there's lots of mortuaries out there.
Yeah.
There's religious ones, non-religious ones, but just in general, Mount Sinai as an organization, how's that a little bit different than some of the other mortuaries or cemeteries out there?
Well, I mean, I think one thing I'm most proud of working at Mount Sinai is that it's a nonprofit.
Okay.
So yeah, it's owned by Sinai Temple. It's our, we we donate millions of dollars a year. So we are here. The proceeds go to maintaining the park. A lot of that is actually done through an endowment, which I can get into in a little bit. But we create a lot of great jobs for a lot of people, including myself, but so many more. But then everything else goes out to the community in the form of grants, programming. You know, mainly the Jewish community, but the greater Los Angeles community. There's even been some like overseas initiatives for a hospital I know in Israel. They gave money. So there's that's something to be really proud of, and I think that's something that people who are part of our family here can feel good about too. It's actually quite a popular thing for cemeteries to be owned by these kind of corporate conglomerates. There's some that are global, and I don't have any insight into what differences that may create, but I know that it's real personal here. People really care, and we're proud of that. I think we're something I told people when I first started working here. I mean, I don't want to get too well, let me backtrack a bit. We serve the whole Jewish community and interfaith community. I think I'm always surprised that people don't realize that you don't have to be Jewish to be buried here. You need to be family to somebody who is Jewish. We are a Jewish cemetery, and we want to protect that and we want to honor that. But we don't separate families ever, obviously. And also, there are many different ways that people are Jewish, who identify as Jewish or they don't identify as Jewish, or maybe their families here, their parents or grandparents, and they no longer, whatever. My point is just that Los Angeles has a real diverse Jewish population, and we serve everyone and honor everyone, including interfaith families. And I'm proud of that. So, and including tastes, in what people want. There's halakhic options here. We have like a halakhic mortuary and Chevra Kadima. We do things with the utmost care for the Orthodox community and for Chabad. We are very proud of that. But then we also offer, opportunities for people who want to be interred in a wall vault, who want to be in a wall. That's what their family prefers. Yeah.
Okay, great. It's good to know. And nonprofit is I think it's good to know. On a little bit lighter subject,
Yeah.
tell me a story of positivity, like an example of something that comes to mind where someone came to you for advanced planning, a family or an individual, and you were able to see the fruits of your labor, and how just a positive story and a reason for advanced planning and it worked out well.
Okay. I mean, it's funny as you say that. My first thought is a story that's like kind of heartwarming, but not light. So I'm going to shift to another memory I have. Something else I don't think I mentioned is I work with people on memorial tablets, which are essentially like our headstones, and they're
Okay.
flat on the ground, which is pretty because it allows for these really expansive views in our parks. And it's something I feel like is most in line with sort of serving the community. That's my supervisor refers to it that way. It's something we're doing for the community. We're staying in contact with them. We're following up with them. Usually within a year after somebody has their service is interred here, we reach out maybe 3 months after the funeral service to talk about the tablet. What do they want to do? Letting them know what the options are, what the costs are, and honoring this individual with them and their family. And it's really rewarding to see this like come to life, and people will have an unveiling, and but there was a woman who I worked with on her husband's tablet, and she was like a real character, and she's still alive, and yet you know had some complications. I know she has cancer, she has Parkinson's, she has multiple sclerosis, but she has like the most incredible sense of humor. And a couple of things. One, she invited me. I had to work. She couldn't leave her home. I had to go do a house call, which I do with people, and she wanted to buy her son a cemetery space as a birthday gift. And it was kind of like a gag, but it's also a great idea,
Sure.
like. And I've heard of somebody doing that as a wedding gift. It's crazy, but it's great. And while I was there, she wanted to make sure that I could put into her file what she wants on her tablet. And what she wants on her tablet is, "Where's my purse?" which I thought was really very funny. And she said, "That's me. That's what people know me as, that person." I mean, and there's so much depth to her, but that's kind of like her cute little thing. She's always looking for her purse, and she's always on her way out. And another little story about her is that her husband's tablet I had done for her. That's how I got to know her. And his was really unique also because, people do have similar tablets and they're beautiful. When they say beloved, husband and father and grandfather, they resonate for those people. When people kind of break that mold, it's always fun. And her husband says, "I'm here if you need me." And I thought that was like kind of a joke. It's kind of funny. It's like, "Hey, I'm here if you need me." There's one I've seen around the park that says, like, "We're having tea," or "knock," or something like that. It's also funny. But when I was at her house, she told me, as I got to know her and I asked her about her husband, she said, "Actually, I'm here if you need me," is what my husband said to me every single night when we went to bed. And I
Wow.
just thought, wow, that's incredible. So she's great. She's somebody who is like putting advanced planning into action. She's got an incredible sense of humor. She has her plans in place completely, all the way up to what she wants on her tablet. And
Nice.
it's yeah,
Well, how about on the flip side,
yeah.
maybe an example of people maybe you met with and either they weren't ready or they kept procrastinating, so they didn't do the advanced planning and it didn't turn out, the way we would hope. Any of those?
I mean, it's interesting. I don't feel like have I had that? Have I? It would be like somebody who I met with, and they were like, because what happens that you meet with people, and they're like, okay, yeah, no, this is great. I want to do this, but we gotta wait. And sometimes they need, they're like other things they want to take care of financially. But I would imagine what you're kind of wondering is if in a situation like that, somebody comes to the park because somebody's passed, and now I'm sitting down with them to do things at need, which means somebody has died, versus
Right.
in advance. I would say, like, I haven't seen that yet, but what I've seen, and I kind of alluded to it a bit, but it's worth bringing up, is just people who, for instance, somebody who shows up and finds out, that they wish they had done this sooner, or that they never did it. That they find out. I mean, the average cost of a funeral arrangements, everything all in, is around $10,000. And space can vary.
That's
You
without
can
the property, right? That's just the,
That's just everything else, yeah. And
yeah,
then, the space can vary. So you could opt for a wall space that's very high up the wall, because the higher up, the lower the price. But a lot
right.
of people want to be, in a lawn space. And so then they're looking at, either about 15,000 or 23, depending on the park. And so you add that up, and it's not, and we have programs to help people, and there are even some organizations that can step in and help when people are really in need.
Sure.
But generally speaking, it's people, like myself, who are like kind of in the middle there. And it's sort of like, wow, like, we got to do this. And it's, we're going to feel it.
Sticker shock.
Yeah, that's it. I think so. So that I've seen that. But
Gotcha.
look, I mean, everybody has their own time frame. I don't know if I want to I'm 49. I'm going to be 49, 48 years old. I met with somebody this Sunday, who was 55. His father had passed last year. And, I think I'm just being honest. That's a little bit on the younger side for people doing it in advance. Their health is fine. They just want to, like, have this be part of their portfolio of things they have in place. And I was really impressed. He found a great space for himself. He has two boys in their 20s. He doesn't want them to have to deal with this. He saw what it cost with his dad. And so I'm only bringing this up because I'm wondering, when am I going to do my advanced planning? Because I do think, in a way, I need to, you know, it's going to be great to be able to, because I want to, and I see the value in it, and I'm going to get there. I think yeah. And I think for me, it has to do with working at Mount Sinai long enough to get a little bit of a discount. But yeah, I think certainly by the time I'm 55, I'll have that taken care of.
As far as the plans, is there any story of some outlandish or crazy plans, that someone's made ahead of time for either the service or a crazy casket or like just some really off the wall type of requests, that people have planned for or asked if they could do.
It's interesting. I mean, give me a few years, I bet you I'll have more stories, but I can tell you this. We we don't customize in that way. I know a guy, actually the only person who's ever mentioned this to me is you. It was when we had lunch once and it was hilarious. You were like, has anyone ever, maybe you can help remind me, had speakers
So
installed?
when I was a teenager, and I still love, home audio and car audio, and I used to love having a very loud car stereo system, and I always joke that in my casket I want to put speakers and like a solar connection to have music for eternity,
That's
and
great.
anybody that comes
So
across my site would
you
maybe
have a
faintly
speaker.
hear some music going on, and it would be, I think
Yeah.
that would be awesome.
Just like, do you hear that? Like there's somebody's partying down
I don't
there.
know if my neighbors for
That's very
eternity
funny.
would like that very much, but
I
uh,
mean, it's hilarious. I feel like Hollywood Forever might have some interesting stuff going on. I mean, yeah.
all right. Anything we've left out that we could pass on to our
Um,
viewers that just to understand the process, or the benefits of it. We've talked about a lot. We've covered the why, I think,
yeah.
why we should do it. But anything we've left out?
I think one thing I'd say, and I say this to people a lot, is you could just have a conversation. It really helps to like grab a coffee, come into Mount Sinai. There are people who they want to learn, they're curious, they're not always ready. Like there's no pressure. And there's also, I mean, so two parts to this. One is you come in and have a tour. Like I have a friend, I'm like, come on in. He's coming this week. I'm like, I'll give you a tour. You know, it, is he interested? Yeah, but like also there's incredible art here at Mount Sinai. We're gonna look at the art, and he has some family. He'll visit his family. So like we want to be a place that's open to the obviously to the public. But we want to be a place where people will come and feel comfortable learning. And a lot of what I do, other than all the things I've discussed, is outreach. So, you and I are talking about doing a speaking event where you'll talk about, financial planning, insurance, and I'm going to speak about advanced planning and, things like that, where part of my job really is to go out into the community and make sure people are aware of this. We think it's a big benefit, but
Sure.
they need to know about it. And also they need to know that there's no pressure, and you don't have to wait till somebody's passed or think they're going to pass. But come in and learn. I think people are glad that they did that. That's part of it. I think there was another thought I was having, but
No, I think that's good. It's
yeah,
there's I think we've talked about a lot of aspects that maybe people never realize, or maybe hopefully we can let people know that there's a lot more steps that to take in consideration, and doing it ahead of time will alleviate those steps for family in the future, and just the importance of hopefully taking care of it ahead of time and not having your loved ones have to, you know, have be a burden. We don't, none of us want to be a burden on our spouses or on our kids. And doing this, I think, relieves, some of that burden, obviously, when that time comes.
you know what?
So,
You inspired me to say one more thing, which is
okay,
just that, like, is that okay? Kind of,
yeah,
just that, it, death is like this part of life. I mean, it's really a Jewish thought. I think it's a universal idea that like it is part of life. It's part of this. Hopefully, in most cases, often it is just a fact of life. It's part of the journey of life. And we have a saying on the gates of Mount Sinai, which is Beit HaChaim, which is the home, the house of the living, because so much of what we do is about taking care of the living. We honor the deceased, but we take care of the living. So it's about all the advanced planning, but it's also about having a place of connection with people who have passed. And that can be a big part of healing and processing loss. And it's forever. We have an endowment care park, both parks in Simi Valley and Hollywood Hills. So we have this endowment where if we couldn't sell property tomorrow, we could maintain the beauty of our parks. And if you've never seen them, they're worth checking out. They're beautiful and
that is
open to the
definitely good.
public. They're gorgeous, and we can maintain the way they look for 300 years in perpetuity, and the land around us is protected. So you're really investing in something that's forever. And I think there's a lot to say for that. And you're investing, not just it's that burden you're taking off your family, but you're also leaving a place of connection for them. So yeah, I just want to throw that in there.
Great, Kurt. Appreciate it. So if someone is interested in advanced planning, how do they get a hold of you?
You can call me directly at 323-769-1351. Again, that number is 323-769-1351. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. My email will be in the show notes as well. And yeah, I'd look forward to talking to, just having a conversation and learning about what's possible. Be great to connect.
Well, fantastic. Well, thanks for listening. This has been a Legacy Leaders podcast with your guest host, Jeff Kritzberg from Innovative Financial Solutions and Insurance. My guest has been Kurt Haas, Advanced Planning Advisor with Mount Sinai Memorial Parks and Mortuaries. For more information about Kurt Haas and the work he does, you can email him at khaas, so Khaas, at mountsinaiparks.org. We'll also link it in the show notes for you. Kurt, thank you so much for participating. It's been a great subject, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you. I enjoyed it too, Jeff. Take care.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.